Hey everyone, welcome back to another tutorial. Today, we're going to be creating a smooth slap mechanic in UEFN that actually moves with your player. We'll be using VFXs, so your hand will follow through realistically instead of teleporting or looking stiff like if you use Move 2. The same method we're going to cover will also be able to be used in a multitude of other game modes, from creating floating tools or even custom weapons. In the tutorial, we'll cover both the method used to attach and animate the hand, along with the verse to assign hands and handle the slap logic. By the end of this video, you'll have your very own custom slap system ready to drop into any map. But before we jump into the tutorial, I want to take a quick second to tell you about Map Academy's Creator Success Program. If you've ever wanted to make advanced mechanics like this one, but without spending hours debugging or figuring everything out alone, then this is exactly what you need. The Creator Success Program gives you access to our entire library of scripts and systems, including things like tycoons, simulators, roguelikes, a steal system, an inventory system. It's even got a more advanced version of what we are making in today's video, along with literally so much more. On top of that, you get personalized support, step-by-step guides, and new scripts every single month, all designed to save you time and help you grow faster as a Fortnite creator. It's like having your own dev team working behind the scenes for you, but at a fraction of the cost. So, if you're serious about taking your maps to the next level while saving time and money in the process, click the first link in the description and check out the Creator Success Program today. Alright, let's get into the video. So the first thing that we're going to do is actually create the system or the method that will animate the hand and attach it to the player. So to do that, the very first thing that you need is going to be a hand static mesh. You can create your own or you can import one. I'm going to go ahead and import one that I already have created. Alright, so I went ahead and imported a static mesh of my hand. You can see it's just a normal static mesh. This cannot be animated, by the way. It needs to be static. If you have an animated mesh, you can make one pretty easily by opening it up and clicking Create Static Mesh. The one important thing that you need to have with this is the pivot point has to be at the base of the hand so that when we rotate it, it's actually going to rotate the hand and not rotate it around the center. So if yours is not like that, what you need to do is go into modeling mode, X-form, click edit pivot, and then just position the pivot where you want it to be. In this case, mine's already there, so I'm good. But we don't actually need this in the play space, so I'm going to delete it. The next thing you need to do is create a material that will actually rotate whatever it is applied to. So we will create a new material. We'll just call this our rotate material and open it up. Inside of this, I'll just select the base color as a white, and then we're going to want to control the world position offset. So what we want to do to the world position is rotate on the axis. So I will search rotate about axis and click on that, and we'll plug this into the world position. But we have some things that we need to plug into this for this to work. First of which is the axis it's actually going to rotate around. So for this, we need a 3 vector. I'm going to hold down 3 and click, and then plug this into our rotation. And then we just need to select one of the axes. In this case, we want to be the Z axis, which is the vertical axis that we want it to rotate around. Next is the actual angle of rotation. For now, I'm just going to put in a float or a constant. We are going to change this later though. And then for the pivot point, we want to get the actual pivot point of the actor. So let's get the object pivot point and plug in the location. And then lastly, for the final position, we just need to get the world position and plug that in like so. So now we have this material, and if we go ahead and hit apply and save, then if we drag down our hand, and in this instance we will apply the material, then we open up this material and minimize it. We can now change this rotation value, and if we change it to like 0.1 and then hit apply, you'll see our hand rotates. So to rotate it forward, we'll need to go -0.1, hit apply, and just like that, it rotates. So that's the very first step, is creating this material. So let's go ahead, I'll reset this to 0 and apply it and then close this out. The next step we need to do is actually make a parameter collection. So let's go ahead and right click, go to material and click material parameter collection. And I am going to call this our rotate param collection 1. And I'm also going to call this our rotate material 1. I'll explain why in a bit. So now let's go ahead and open up this parameter collection. And inside of this, we just want to be able to change the rotation. So I will create a scalar parameter, which is a single value, and I'll change the name to hand rotation. And we'll leave the default value as 0 and save this. Now I can go and close it at this. We'll open up our rotate material 1, and we want to replace our rotation constant here. So I will full screen this, delete this, right click, and we need to get a parameter collection, or a collection parameter. Then we plug this in, and for this collection parameter, we need to select which collection. So if we go down here, we'll select the parameter collection that we have, and then we need the actual parameter name. So we will select that parameter we just created. Now, just like that, our parameter collection can be used to control this material. So again, here, now we can just open up our parameter collection. If we change this value, it will change the value of the hand, like so. Very nice. Let's go ahead and save. The next thing we need is something that's actually going to control this parameter collection. So I will create a level sequence, and I'm going to call this our rotate sequence 1. Open it up. We'll click add material parameter collection track and select our first collection. Then in this, if you expand it a little bit, you can see a parameter. We'll add hand rotation. We can drop this down. So we'll start it at 0, and we'll say in 1 second, it will be set to 1. Or we'll just go boom, like so. So 1 is going to be a full rotation. It's not what we want. We actually want it to be probably -0.5-ish, or maybe -0.25. So if we play it, it goes boom, -0.25. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit faster. I will move this so that it's at 0.5. Then I'm going to copy my first keyframe, which is at 0, go to 1, click on the track and paste it. So now in 1 second, it slaps and goes back. Now we have our slap animation. Let's go ahead and head back and make sure this actually ends after 1 second, like so. Perfect. We now have this slap animation. We can go ahead and save the sequencer. The very last thing we need to do is now create a VFX that we can add this mesh to and attach to the player. All right, you want to hit right click, go to Niagara system, click directional burst is kind of a preset, and we'll call this our rotate VFX 1. Then open this up. Inside of this, we want to get rid of add velocity and delete everything here. And then we also want to delete the render and add our mesh render. Inside of the meshes, we're going to go ahead and select our hand mesh and enable a material override, and then select our hand or our rotate material, like so, and then hit compile and save. If you get some errors here and the material isn't applying, make sure to open up your material and turn on the use with mesh particles and used with Niagara mesh particles. Then just resave this and it should fix. Next up, you want to go to the particle state, turn off kill particles, and turn on the loop particles in lifetime. Then in the initialized particle, we'll change the min and the max to 1, and then go to spawn burst instantaneous. We want to change the spawn count to 1, go to the emitter state, and change the loop duration mode to infinite. Then lastly, but importantly, click on the entire thing and turn on local space. Then you can go ahead and compile and save. And now if we go ahead and drag down our VFX, you can see we have our hand. If we move it up a little bit, then we open up our parameter collection, or actually our cinematic, and play it, you'll see inside of the VFX, it is rotating this hand. So now we can close this out, and we have our hand slap kind of VFX created that we can actually control with a parameter in a sequence. So now we can move on to the verse section. I'm going to go ahead and go verse explorer, right click on my project name and click add new verse file. I'll call this our slap controller and hit create. This might take a few seconds, but once it's done, you'll see it here and you can double click to open it up. Inside of this, we want to assign a slapper whenever a player joins the game. So I will go to on begin and go through every single player in get play space dot get players, and I will call a initialize, and I'll initialize my player. And then I'll also, don't forget to get play space dot player added event dot subscribe, and we'll initialize so that whenever new players join, they will also get initialized. Now let's go down here and create our function. We'll call this initialize, and we'll take in a player like so. And inside of this, we want to assign the player a VFX, but we'll go and block now because we need to create our VFX. Also, we have an error here, and that's just because we need these parentheses. So because we want different players to have their own VFXs that are controlled, we are going to need a different material, parameter collection, sequence, and VFX for every single player that's going to be in the game. Or else, if one player plays their animation, it's going to play the animation for all players, which we don't want. So that means we need to create an array of these things. In Verse, all we actually need is a cinematic to control the sequence and the VFX to apply to the player. So I'm going to make a new class, and I'll call this our custom hand class. And I'll make it concrete because I'm going to put editables inside of it. And inside of this, we will put both a hand cinematic of type cinematic sequence device, like so. And then we also need the VFX. So editable hand VFX of type VFX, or it's actually visual effect power up device, like so. And that's all we need inside of our custom hand. So let's go ahead and now create an array of custom hands. We'll create an editable, and we'll call this our custom hands type array of custom hand is equal to array, like so. So now we need to assign one of these custom hands to the player, but we want to make sure that it's not the same custom hand as another player already has. So I'll actually add a variable in this, and I'll call this is assigned of type logic, and we'll say it starts as false. So whenever a player gets initialized, we're going to go through every single custom hand in custom hands like so. And if our custom hand dot is assigned is equal to false, then we will assign this by connecting it to the player, but we need a way to be able to do that. So what I'll do is go in our Slap controller and create a player map, which will link a player to another custom class. First, let's go ahead and actually create that class. So I'll just call this our custom hand player, which is going to be a class. It is not concrete because we do not have any editables. And inside of it, we have a player, and it also needs a custom or a current hand type custom hand. And now we can go create a map. So I'll call this var, and we'll say player hands map type. And you initialize a map by putting 2 brackets and putting the key inside of the brackets, which is going to be a player. And then on the other side, you put what's actually assigned to this key. So we'll put our custom hand and not assign it to an array, but assign it to a map like so. So now we need to initialize the player inside of this map once a custom hand is found. So I will say if, let's first check if the player is already inside the player map. So we'll say if not player hands map, and we'll put in the player. So if the player is not already in the map, is what that's saying. Then we will if set player hands map player equal to custom hand player, where inside of it we need to initialize the player. So player is equal to the player that's actually in this function, and then the current hand, which is equal to the hand that we're trying to assign. So now the player will get assigned a custom hand that is available or that is not assigned whenever they first join. Whenever we do this though, we also need to go ahead and set the custom hand dot is assigned equal to true so that it cannot get assigned to another player. Also, one more thing we need to do is unassign this custom hand whenever the player leaves. So let's do this. We will say get play space dot player removed event dot subscribe, and on player removed, let's go ahead and make that function on player removed type player like so. And we will say if the play or our player, or if our CHP, which will be the custom hand player, is equal to, now let's get our player from the map like so. Then we will access our custom player's current hand, and we want to set the current hands dot is assigned equal to false. So whenever the player is removed, it gets the player from the player map so that we have access to its current hand, and then it sets that current hand to no longer being assigned because the player left the game. So perfect, now we are assigning this hand. We also need to go ahead and apply the VFX to the player. So I will write ch dot hand VFX dot pick up, and we'll pick up for the player. So now whenever the hand gets assigned, it's also going to pick up that VFX for the player. All right, now we have our full hand assign system working. What we need to do is track when the player actually uses their hand and slaps. So for that, we are going to use an input trigger device and of type input trigger device, like so. Make sure to initialize it. And then we will go under on begin, and we need to track whenever a button is pressed. So we'll say input trigger device dot pressed event dot subscribe, and we will call on input pressed. Then go down here and write on input pressed, and it should send an agent, and we return a void. So the first thing we need to do is actually get the player from the player map. We already did this up here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and copy that. And instead just replace this with agent. You don't need to do a player because an agent can be cast as a player. And so now we need to play the cinematic. So I will write chp dot current and dot hand cinematic dot play. So this will actually play the animation. The last thing we need to do is track if it's actually hitting any other players and push the player back whenever that does happen. We'll spawn a function here and we'll call this our handle slap function, and we'll send it the player. Then we'll go down here and create it. We'll call it the handle slap function, like so. And we also want to make sure this suspends. Then under here, we should first sleep for 0.5 seconds, which is when the player actually finishes slapping or is halfway through their slap. You can change this a little bit if you wanted to activate a little bit quicker. You could also have it instant. But then we need to check if other players are in front of this player. So what we'll do is go through every single player in get play space dot get players. And we'll also call this our other player. And under this, we'll check if other player is not player, or you could also write this as is not other player equal to player. Both of those work, just different syntax. And here we need to check if this other player's position is in front of the other player. So the first thing we actually need to do is go back up here and get the fort character of our main player. So we'll do player.get fort character. You might get an error here like so. And if you do, then you just need to add using Fortnite.com/characters here at the top. I've got a extension that does that automatically. And inside of this, we will get the player's position, which is equal to fc.getTransform.translation. We also want to get the direction the player is looking. So I'll say player rotation is equal to fc.getViewRotation. So it's actually where their mouse is looking and not where their body is. And then we need to get the forward vector. So basically an arrow that's facing forward in front of the player. We'll call this our player forward. And to get this, we just do our player rotation dot get local forward. Also there, you might need to add something extra up top here. Then we need to actually add the dimensions of the box we're going to use. So I'm going to create a vector3, which is going to be the kind of size of the box that the player is going to be, or that whatever a player slaps is going to appear in front of the player. And if any other players are inside of this box with these dimensions, then they will get hit. So we'll say the X value is 200, the Y value is 200, and the Z value is maybe 300. So I'll also make the Y value 300. Next, we need to get the very center point of where this box is going to be. So I will say center point is equal to, it's important to note that we want this box to be in front of the player and not inside of the player. So what we'll do is we'll write the player forward, which is that player forward vector. That's just like a little line that's pointing in front of the player and where they're looking. And we'll multiply it by our dimensions.x. So the actual like length of the box. And we're going to add that, but we also want to multiply this by 1/2, so 0.5 times this, because we're trying to get the center point, not the very end point. And then lastly, to actually get it, we have to add this to the player's position, or else it'll just be at like 0, 0. And then because we kind of need to make a new extent, seeing as we're starting here at half of the X width, we also need to create a new extent, which will be basically the same as our dimensions, but we will half our X value. So we'll say 0.5 times this, or you could just do it manually. Just put 100. Now let's also go ahead and make a debug draw so that we're able to view this and where the box is so we can make adjustments later. So to do that, we should need to go up here, and I'll call this our debug draw of type debug draw, like so. And then we can just click we can just paste debug draw dot draw box. And here, if we hover over draw box, let's go ahead and actually find that in the documentation. So if I go verse, go draw box, it's not there. It's in Unreal Engine. Here we have a center and a rotation and an extent. So let's add all of those. First is the center, so we already have the center point. Then the rotation, we'll use the player rotation. And then we need the new extent, so I'll say extent is equal to new extent. Like so. You could also assign the color and the duration. I will go ahead and assign the duration, so I'll say duration is equal to 0.5. So now that we have all of this information that we need, we can go and tab over the stuff where we're checking through every player, and we need to check that they're inside of this box that we have. So the first thing we need to do is actually get their position. So I'll write if our other FC is equal to other player dot get fort character, like so. And then we'll say our other position is equal to other. Let's go ahead and actually change that. I did a mistype. So other FC dot get transform dot translation, like so. Now we need to check if this point, this position, is inside of our box. So to do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and make a custom function. So I will go down here and I'll say is in box. And inside of this, we need the point to check. So I'll say point of type vector 3. The center of the box, which is also a vector 3. And then the extent of the box, which is also a vector 3. And then we'll just return a void here, or we'll return a logic. Down here, I'll just write return false. And now we need to actually check if this point is in the center or extent. So to do that, I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy and paste some code that I already have. And what this does is basically it checks if the point X is in between the center or the edge, and it does it on both edges of the extent or both sides of the center. Then it does the same for Y and the same for Z. And if all of these are true, then it will return true. So if the player or this point is in this box, it will return true. I'll pause for a couple seconds so you can go ahead and copy this. You can pause the video if you need some time. So now let's go ahead and use this function. I'll go down here and say is player in box is equal to is in box. And then first we'll pass it the point, which is the other position. Then the center, which is our center point. Lastly, our extent, which is going to be the new extent. And now that we have this, we can say if the player, or if is player in box, make sure to put a question mark at the end. You could also just do if is player in box is equal to true. That also works. Then we actually need to handle what happens whenever the player gets slapped, because this means that that player is going to get slapped. So there's two things we can do. First, I'm just going to go ahead and add a player is slapped trigger, type trigger device, like so. And then I'll add a push player movement modulator of type movement modulator device, like so. So first we'll do the trigger. We'll go down here and write player slap trigger dot trigger for this other player. This is just so you can connect it to something else. Maybe you have a steal system and you want them to stop stealing whenever they get slapped. You can just connect this trigger to that. And then we need to also do the movement modulator. So I'll copy that and go down here and write push player movement modulator dot activate other player. But this is just going to push the player if we have the settings correctly. We want this to actually be rotated in the direction that the player should be pushed back from. So what we need is we need to get the rotation of our player that's slapping to the player that is being slapped. For that, I am also going to go ahead and use a custom function. I'm going to go down here and I already have this function made. So I'll just paste it in. What we're doing here, just so I can explain, you can just copy this if you don't care. But so what this will do is if you give it two locations, it will return the rotation needed for the first position to be looking at the second position. So all we need to do is say our new rotation is equal to get rotation to location. We'll put the player position and then the other position. So now that we have the rotation of the player position looking towards the other player's position that's getting slapped, we now need to just rotate this push player modulator. So we'll say push player movement modulator dot teleport to, and we'll teleport it to its own position. So dot get transform dot translation, and then we'll do our new rotation for the rotation. We'll get an error because we need to put this into an if statement, or I could just put or, and I'll write print teleport failed. This is a nice way to do if statements for simple stuff like a teleport. That's going to normally just be one line. So now it'll actually rotate this movement modulator in the correct direction so that it pushes the player back whenever they are slapped. And boom, just like that, that is all we need to do for this slap controller device. Now let's actually go ahead and set it up. I'll go and I'll build a verse code. I'll go into our main content folder and grab out our slap controller, place it down. Inside of this, first we have an array of custom hands. So if we add our first element, inside we have the cinematic and the VFX. Let's go ahead and create those. I will look for a cinematic sequence device and place this down. Call this our slap sin 1. Inside of this, we are going to select our rotate sequence 1, and we don't need to do anything else in that. Then we will create a VFX power up, place this down. We'll call this our slap VFX 1. Inside of this, we'll change the infinite effect duration, change the respawn time to 0, turn off the ambient audio, change the visual effect to custom, and then select our first slap, the VFX, and I'll make it so that it's socketed to the center. Nothing else that you need to change in this, but we can now go to our slap controller and select both of these. Now you want to go ahead and create as many of these as you're going to have players in your game. So I'll create a second one, and you want to copy everything over with it. So first, I'm going to copy our rotate material, then the collection parameter, and the sequence and the VFX. You could probably just select them all and copy them at once. So now I will select my rotate material 2, go down here, go into the material parameter collection, and select my second one. It'll still have the same parameter name selected, so I'll hit apply and save. Then go into my sequence. Make sure it's your second one though. And we will change this material parameter collection to our second one. Hit save. Lastly, we go into our VFX and change the mesh renderer, and we select our new material and compile and save. Then we just need to copy over our VFX power up and cinematic device, copy them both in the VFX power up. We'll select the new VFX, and you could have guessed it, in the cinematic we select the new sequence. Then do that again and again for every single one of the players you're going to have in your game, and select them inside of this array. So we now have both of those selected, so we can minimize this array because I'm just going to test this with 2 players. Next, we need the input trigger device that's actually used to slap players, so I will grab that. Input trigger device, place it down. Inside of this, we'll change the input type to standard, fire, and consume input. You can go ahead and change the description if you want to slap. And then select that. We can also go ahead and grab just a normal trigger device out. Call us our player is slapped trigger, and select that. Lastly, our movement modulator. Let's go ahead and grab that. Place it down. And this will turn off effect movement speed, turn on apply impulse. Then you can change the impulse to what you would like, but you do want to go down here and turn off apply remote impulse relative to player direction. Then we can go back and select that. And just like that, our entire device is set up, and we now have a slap mechanic that's going to work in game. Let me go ahead and launch session with 2 accounts, and we'll test this out. One quick thing you want to make sure you do is go into your island settings, scroll all the way down to the very bottom, and you'll see debug, turn on verse debug draw so that you can actually see the box radius. This will only actually appear in UEFN though. Alright, so now in game, you can see you have the slap attached. If I click the button, we have a box that appears, and if I do go over here and slap another player, boom, they get pushed back. Obviously, to reposition the slapper, you want to do that inside of the VFX, so just go into the mesh and move it, and then to change the size of the dimensions for the box, you just want to do that in Verse where we edit that. So yep, that's everything you need to know to be able to make your own slap mechanic inside of UEFN. And just like that, you've got yourself a fully working slap mechanic that moves smoothly with your player. If you found this tutorial helpful and want to support us in making more, leave a like, subscribe, and comment below what mechanic you want to see next. Also, don't forget to check out Map Academy in the description below to access all of our scripts, assets, and the Creator Success Program. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.